Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Jay and Mike. Barry, what's up, gentlemen?
Hey.
Well, the boys are back.
That's what I hear. Where are they?
This the original Scoundrels. Here they are.
Yep. Yeah, so Mike, for those that don't know, was with us all the way back to when we started doing this, I guess 5 years ago now? Roughly?
Yeah. So yeah. So it was 2018. So I think we started in August, and then I think you guys started in September.
Yeah, so not quite 5 years, but close.
But yeah, really close.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago in a game far away.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That game was...
Well, you guys were writing for the blog, right? And then Kyle, there was Never Tell Me the Odds blog.
Yep.
And then Mike was writing for you, and I had Kyle on the Fifth Trooper podcast because I had found his tool in the blog. And then I think, what was it? Shortly after that, you and I were talking, and you're like, "Hey, I might want to start a podcast." And I was just like, "I'll help. Let's go. Let's do it."
Yeah, basically, it was like several people approached me, and they were like, "Hey, how come no one's doing a competitive podcast for Legion?" And I'm like, "I don't know. That's a good question." So then I asked Jay, I'm like, "What do I do? Like, how do I get started?" And you were like, you ask me. and then we do it together. That's how we get started. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Those were the days of us just like talking, and Jay would just like hide behind a curtain and listen the whole time.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a long time because we didn't have Zoom back then.
We did not.
No. And recording was a little bit more complicated. And so so it was basically me just no camera, no audio, just like off in the like zoning out, like reading stuff while you guys were talking, like half paying attention. And then as it moved on, I started talking a little bit more and adding stuff, and then we rotated into just the three of us, and then we rotated into into the third that was always rotating, and Mike's back, and it's great.
Hey. Yeah.
Very exciting.
So this is going to be kind of our I guess variety show episode in our rotation here. I don't know if that's quite the right word for it, but it's basically going to be like hey, let's talk about stuff that's happened recently, what we think of how things are going in the competitive scene. If you missed the competitive discussion on the hobby episode last week, this is the podcast for you, at least as far as how things have been going since the balance update. So but first, you got some housekeeping for us, Jay?
Housekeeping.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I'd like to point out something. Now, I'm not going to give you all the information because I don't actually have it all. But you guys are going to be hearing a lot more from Mike. He is going to be one of the co-hosts of our new Shatterpoint podcast that's going to be coming out soonish.
Wait, Jay, you haven't told me anything about this.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Surprise.
Yeah. Putting you back to work. And so Mike has been playing Shatterpoint. So if you guys are really loving Shatterpoint, I know a bunch of people have been asking me anyways. I don't know about you, Kyle, but have been DMing me going, "Hey, are you guys doing Shatterpoint podcast? Like, what's going on with that?" And frankly, I don't like doing things before it's out. Like, I had no information on Shatterpoint whatsoever, whether it was good, whether it was playable. I knew nothing. And so for me to make a decision to spend money on something that I had, to talk about a game that I had no information on seemed silly at the time. But now it's out. People are digging it. Mike is digging it. And so, so we're going to do a Shatterpoint podcast, and Mike's going to be one of the co-hosts. So very excited about that. Stay tuned. That will be out soon.
Yeah, soon-ish.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair. It'll be fun. It's been a nice detour from Legion.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll, we've just got to dot some T's and cross some I's, and and we'll get there. But yeah, so that's one thing. And as always, if you end up listening and you love that podcast, I highly recommend subscribing to our Patreon, because that will help pay for that podcast and keep it up and running. Just like our blog and our other podcasts. So if you love any of the content any of these guys put out, please think about supporting us, even at the dollar level. That helps. So yeah. Other than that, I don't really have anything else, Kyle. That's it.
Let's go exploring with Notorious Scoundrels.
Awesome. All right.
Yep.
Well, we're going to talk. So we've had a few tournaments now since the points update. We've got some results from those tournaments that we're going to talk about. We've also played some games recently. Mike, you went to a tournament in New Jersey.
Apparently, I thought it was in Philadelphia, which I thought was in Pennsylvania, but apparently it's also in Jersey. I don't know. There was some people who had feelings about that at the tournament, but
okay.
Is that like Kansas City, right? Like, isn't that in like two different places too?
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, we came to Philadelphia to play in this tournament, and they were like, no, you're in Jersey. It's like, all right.
But Philadelphia is right over there.
Yeah.
I
was like, I'm pretty sure we're like in the Philadelphia like Beltway situation. I don't know. I imagine it's like a similar like DC Nova thing going on.
Yeah. I think most of New Jersey is either in the Philadelphia metro area or the New York City metro area.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for New Jersey.
And for the rest of us.
Apologies if you're from New Jersey and I just offended you. But
I don't actually care.
I've been there several times. It's great.
I have too, and I've hated every time. So
you know what? One thing I really enjoy and appreciate about New Jersey
is
the fact that everywhere they have signs posted basically that say left lane, passing lane, just in case you forgot. Because one of my pet peeves about driving in places that don't have said signs is that people will just like drive in the left lane.
Huh.
Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate New Jersey knows what's up in that regard. Anyway.
It's a good thing he's never been a passenger in my car.
Yeah, come to think of it, every time we've gone on a road trip somewhere, I'm the one that's driving.
So. I mean, in fairness, I believe you've had a manual.
Yes.
And I cannot drive stick, so
that's true. I do drive a manual, so yeah. Which is fine. I enjoy driving. I do not like being a passenger, so in general. So yeah. Anyway,
you learn something about Kyle every day.
Yeah.
There you go.
And now you guys know why he's the one to always start this podcast.
That's only exclusive to driving, Jay. Come on.
Oh, sure.
All right. Anyway, so we're going to talk about some tournament results. We're going to talk about some games we had. How about we start with just the tournament that you played in this weekend, Mike? Why don't you tell us about it? What did you bring? How'd you do? Did you have any fun highlights?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a 32-person tournament at Top Deck Games in New Jersey. First off, locale was awesome. The store is really spacious, just awesome in every regard. Additionally, Nick Bodner from Legion 99 was hosting it. He did an awesome job, kicked some serious butt. So overall, super well run event. Highly recommend if you see a tournament there to go check it out. I'm sure that they plug it over on Legion 99 all the time. So as far as how I guess my run at the tournament went, I made a mistake at Worlds and I brought a list I didn't like. And so in contrast to my LVO run where I brought a list that I really liked, though I didn't know it until I started playing at that tournament. I brought it to LVO as a joke.
For those that don't remember, Mike was second at LVO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I brought 501st LVO. And I've played probably 30 games with 501st since then, in various configurations. And I didn't bring it to Worlds because I was like, Dark Troopers are a thing and there's no impact in 501st, and that's a problem, yada, yada, yada. But I'm pretty convinced, and this is something maybe we can get into later today or later on a different episode, that 501st is actually the best iteration of a GAR list that exists presently today, particularly with the points nerfs, or points buffs, I guess you should say, to ARCs.
Bold.
The reason why that is very complicated. And
I'd like to hear it.
Pretty nuanced, yeah. But let's table that for a second as we're talking about the tournament or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. All right.
This is my podcast now.
We'll park it for later, but I want to hear about it.
You will. So anyhow, I brought 501st in an updated fashion to Top Deck, and games were good. I played against an Anakin. there were 7 ARC units on the board on my first game, so that was cool. The only people that brought ARC troopers got paired against each other round 1, so that was spectacular. I played against some quad Mando Shadow Collective goodness round 2. And then I played against Hob from the Discord round 3, playing Vader Boba, like 6 storms with like specialists, using Vader to compel them. And then round 4, I played against a variant of Luke Cook's Worlds list, which was tweaked a little bit. It had like 1 less activation in it, and it had like more. I don't remember if Luke's list from Worlds had 3 short troopers in it with heavies, but this one did. And it had Dell and a couple other things. It
and
definitely
1 less Luke Cook.
1 less Luke Cook. Yes, yeah,
Key
absolutely.
ingredient.
Absolutely. Definitely an important ingredient for sure. So I guess I don't think there was anything super remarkable about the games. I would say that overall they were pretty standard. I swung Anakin's lightsaber once in 4 games, which is how you should play Anakin. Generally, you only swing his lightsaber if you need to. Otherwise, he's just like Padme plus. And yeah, I think my tightest game was round 2 against the Mandos, where they my opponent, his name was Travis, was very aggressive and basically like knew he was outranged because I've got 4 snipers and nobody else does, pretty much. And even if other people have 4 snipers, mine are better. Sorry, folks. He decided that his quad Mandos were just gonna like all in on an ARC trooper squad, and he put it down to 1 health after I used both my medics. We were playing VAPs, and he got very close to being able to like in and out with his Mandos and force me into a very awkward position, but he didn't, and then I was able to kind of scrape a Mando squad off the board, and it kind of deteriorated from there. But it was like, as far as like closeness goes, that's probably the tightest it got, is like the opening rounds of that game. So,
and you got an invite, right?
I did get an invite. Yeah. I guess that's sort of important. Yeah, I'm qualified for Worlds. Yeah. My general feeling is that I'm probably not going to do, now that I have it this early in the season, I'm probably not going to do a lot of traveling for events and stuff. Because Dark Troopers are still a thing, and I don't really want to pay to fly across the country to go play against Dark Troopers. And B, because I'm also pretty into Shatterpoint and would like to spend some time doing that,
there you go.
So,
well, now you can just kind of chill a little bit now that you got that pressure off.
That's the hope. Yeah.
I would say that was one of the nice things, like for the first world, or the second Worlds, when before COVID hit, like I think I got mine like in April, like right after Worlds, and it's just like, okay, that's off my list now. Like I can focus on other stuff. I could play around. I can like play some silly list to figure out if something's good that I've been, there's not this pressure like that every tournament that's got an invite on the line, I have to go to win because I need to get that, for Worlds. So I think there's something said to having it. I mean, halfway, we're halfway to Worlds and having it now,
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've always felt like a consistent pressure. I'm like somebody that people in the Legion community know. If I don't get an invite, I don't know. I feel like there are expectations there that aren't just mine. And maybe that's me putting more pressure on myself than is due. But I definitely do feel that way sometimes.
No, I think a lot of our team feel. I think maybe myself. I can't even think of another person on our team that doesn't care about the World's invite besides me. Like I mean I care, but I don't think it matters if I get it. But I think that's a true pressure for our whole staff. There's I don't think it's true. I don't know that the audience feels that way, but sometimes, early on I felt that way where it's like, well, I have to get this in order to prove that I know what I'm talking about. Because if I don't get this, then who's going to listen to me? Turns out everyone.
Turns out they don't give a shit.
That turns out.
Yeah. It's all in your mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, congrats on that. And then also Corey, right? Got the other one?
Yep. Corey Satuli from Inglorious Blasters, another great podcast. Also pretty local to the DC-esque region. They're like more in Baltimore.
Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah. Great group of guys. He was the bad guy. He brought double dark troopers and his round 3 opponent brought 3 laser ATRTs. And apparently Corey made his first 12 saves, so that was I guess pretty tilting.
Notable too that he had a list. I think it was Krennic with aggressive tactics, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure about aggressive tactics, but it definitely had Krennic in it.
I'm like 80% sure that it had aggressive tactics also, which Dark Troopers with aggressive tactics. I don't feel like people were really hammering that before Worlds or at Worlds, really. I don't know why. It makes them so much more durable.
You don't really need it if you're just like Guardian in all of the hits that's true. They're taking, right? Like if your game plan was my Dark Troopers are just not going to roll defensively, like why spend the tech?
That's fair. If and lots of people did the IRG thing. Yeah, now that you can't do that anymore, people are doing the aggressive tactics thing, and it's just a different way to make your Dark Troopers fun to kill.
Turns out also good.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the unit itself is good.
I mean, I don't actually think Dark Troopers are above average.
Okay, so here's the thing about
and the hot takes are back on the Scoundrels.
I don't want to say they're good or bad. What you definitely can say is that they ask a question in the list building stage, and if you can't or don't answer that question, then you have a very difficult time dealing with them in the game.
Yes, I think in a vacuum, in a world where you assume that everybody has impact in their lists, they are fine to middling and perhaps even bad.
But you're talking about like a lot of impacts.
I'm talking. I think now that the Guardian thing is gone, I think that like somewhere in the realm of like impact 6 to 8, which I don't think is like a ton.
So it's a lot more achievable than 10 to 12.
Yes, for sure. I definitely think 6 to 8 is a reasonable answer presently. And I still think Anakin Saber Throw with an RPS fire support is just now the Guardian and Barrier off the table is just like pretty much an auto lose situation for Dark Trooper lists. For the most part,
it's pretty bad.
It's not fun if you're playing.
Also, very common because Anakin is super good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think fundamentally, so there's 2 things there. The first is that they are still winning tournaments, right? I mean, Corey went undefeated to get that invite. we've seen some other tournaments already won by Dark Troopers with the new points. But I think they're kind of a token gatekeeper list. That's a term from other miniatures games, but basically it means that they're not necessarily gonna like win the whole thing, but they're definitely going to just outright prevent certain types of lists from winning just by virtue of existing. And they're going to have an effect as a result on competitive list building just because they're there. That doesn't mean that they're like overpowered in the traditional sense, but it does mean that they have like a negative chilling effect on the diversity of lists and the things that you can bring. So I think something like that, and maybe this is a conversation for another day, but something like that can both be not overpowered, and I'm not saying one way or another whether they are, but can be like a quote unquote normal unit from a power level perspective, but also a problem from a list diversity perspective at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a problem, and they still are definitely a problem. Like, I don't hot takes inbound, but if you think they're not, like, you're crazy. I don't know. We are playing different games, but they certainly are. But I do think that they are a fair unit in the game space of like assuming that your opponent planned for them. Like they are fair.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and to go back and like to reiterate, I guess, and like kind of reassemble what Kyle said is that even if they are or are not at the tournament you're about to go to, the fact that they're on your mind and that you have to build as if they're going to be there, it becomes a problem as far as your list is concerned, because if you don't do it and they show up, they're gonna most likely walk over you. If you do it and they don't show up, then your list isn't the most optimal it could potentially be against other lists at the same time. Like the fear of them being there is almost like crippling to list building,
I actually, the way that I have kind of thought about this, I think I don't think it's that much different than force push. I do think it feels different from how big of an actual problem it is, but I think since basically Legion has existed, you have had to have an answer to a unit with force push in your list, whether it's Boba with whipcord or something else. If you don't have force push, like you need a plan to how to deal with it. And I think Dark Troopers would definitely take that idea to the extreme. But I fundamentally don't think it's that different from a gatekeeping perspective, at least in how I have always viewed list building for Legion. Like I don't see any list hot takes that can't deal with a Jedi is anywhere close to like viable in a competitive format.
Yeah, I think the answer there, though, as far as bringing a quote way to deal with force push, is a lot more varied than just like with Dark Troopers. It's a number that you need for impact weapons.
Yeah.
With force push, there's lots of different ways that you can tailor your objective deck to just make it so that your force users are relevant. You can bring melee units that aren't force users. You can bring your own copy of force push. You can plan to basically shoot them with a lot of things. You can bring enough units that are decent enough in melee, like stormtroopers, where if you have a reasonable shot at punching them to death after shooting them, and that was, for example, like force pushes have been around since the start of the game, right?
Yeah.
When I played back all the way back in season 3 of Invader League, I had what most people would consider a pure gun line. I had Veers, I had Bosk, I had 6 stormtroopers and 3 snipers, and that's it. No melee units, no force push, no whipcord. And it did just fine against force users because there was so much firepower that like even if I could get a shot or two on the way in, it was enough to soften them up, where I then had 6 stormtroopers who are actually reasonably decent in melee for core units to like punch off those last 3 to 4 wounds. So while I think it's a similar conversation in that like you need to be able to bring a counter to something that is popular and good. I think that there's a lot more different varied ways to do that with something like force push over, Dark Troopers, where it's just like, do I have enough impact weapons, yes or no? And then even once you get into the actual game, with Dark Troopers, I feel like if the answer that you've had to that question is no, the game itself, again, somewhat battle card dependent, but often is just kind of like a formality. Like I've seen lots of.
I have I just concede most of them before they start at this point, because I've conceded multiple high profile games at this point. Like I conceded the finals of Richmond Open before we even had it. I was like, I don't need it. I know how this is gonna go. We're good.
Yeah, and that's kind of at least like if you run into a force user and you don't have your own copy of force push or your own whipcord, like there are still things you can do over the course of the game to deal with it.
Yeah.
There are ways you could get lucky. There are some mistakes that your opponent could make. There are plays you could make. And like actually playing it out is a very different animal in that situation than like against Dark Troopers, where if you haven't checked that box, it's just like, all right, I guess we could go through the motions for 3 hours, but we know how this is going to go.
Yeah,
So,
I think you're highlighting a pretty important like difference as far as like clearly how they were designed. Like, I mean, the game has been designed with force push in mind since day one.
right.
So like we've got, so many different answers or ways that we've developed to deal with it, right? Unfortunately, there's only one way to deal with Dark Troopers, particularly now with force choke being kind of melted into the ground.
Yep.
Which is fine. Great. Good job, team. I'm all about
says
that.
the ARC player.
Yeah, man. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. Thank you, AMG. But yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, in that I do think the primary difference between the two things is that there are solutions to one that are varied and inclusive, and there are not for the other.
Right. And the actual, even if you didn't bring one of those solutions explicitly in list building, you can still make a game of it, and you can still make decisions during the game that maybe render that disadvantage less of a disadvantage. Whereas, like if you can't damage Dark Troopers, you're not going to win. You're not gonna be able to crit fish to the point where they can not run you over. So yeah, I think it's, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they increased their points so soon after they came out. I mean, they only came out 4 months ago at this point. We've had some quick nerfs in this game in the past. The bus comes to mind, back whatever that was, 3 years ago now. A couple other things, but look, I think it's great that they increased their points in such a short time span. I don't think that it really addresses their core issue, but I don't know how you do that without like redesigning Dark Troopers.
Yeah,
They've got to be errated.
Well, sure. And I think there's lots of different ways to do that, but you'd essentially have to like redesign what they do in order to, because I think if you were just like, well, let's just make them armor X instead of full armor, then I think that you have to look at unconcerned, and how that interacts with cover and them being able to be repaired. And then maybe you have to look at unstoppable, because you can't make them like too cheap and still give them 2 activations. And like I've seen like 4 or 5 different solutions for Dark Troopers floated around about errating keywords or changing how they work. And I think if you did any one of those, you potentially create like a cascade effect where you have to end up just leading to like a full redesign of Dark Troopers. I don't think that, at least in my opinion, none of those individual solutions, some of them would make it so that Dark Troopers were just objectively bad and unplayable.
I think that's okay at this point.
Well, sure, but I guess my point is, if your goal is to make it so that there's still a unit that like people occasionally take, that you get to a space where once you make one of those changes, you have to look at other changes, and by that time you've made 3 or 4 changes, and they're a totally different unit anyway. So yes, there are definitely some changes you could make that would just make them like a flavor unit that nobody seriously took to a tournament. And maybe that would probably be healthier for the meta as a whole, if they just got deleted from existence.
I'd love it. I'd have no natural predators. It would be great.
Yeah, right. 501st arcs would just be like, no more choke, no more dark troopers. All right,
Yeah.
let's go buy some arc boxes. Um,
From the fifthtrooper.com.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Well,
Do you have 501st Legion in stock? Is that I don't think my store has it.
No, so funny story about that. They pulled that from the shelves, so you can't even. We can't.
Oh,
even
you can't get it at all.
Because they had a bunch of. Listen, it happens. I'm not no slight against them, but they had a bunch of printing errors in it, and so I think they pulled it in order to fix those.
Which, you know, I think that's to the
Good.
extent that they had those printing errors. I think that's a good step.
Yep.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll get them back out at some point.
Yep.
In the meantime, maybe I'll have to buy another box of normal arc troopers. We'll see.
There you go. There you go.
I've been intrigued by your 501st exploits. I've always enjoyed playing Anakin and or clones. I'll probably just end up playing Anakin Padme if I play them, which is what I'm familiar with, but mostly because arcs are very time consuming to paint.
I mean, you painted half of mine, so
that's yes.
He wasted all his patience and time on yours, and now he refuses.
that is true. That is objectively true. But I think that your paint scheme is a lot easier and faster than mine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I went with the dark paint scheme because it's easy to hide mistakes, and it definitely it's pretty quick. So
yeah, mine are white with the blue 501st, and I painted Echo and I painted his homeboy, and I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm good.
White is so hard to paint. That's one of the main reasons my clones aren't white. You know, just because I'm not a very good painter, so I was like, you know what, we're going custom paint scheme on this because I can't do it,
and it's just so unforgiving. Like,
yeah,
because you'll just be like, you know, you start painting and you're like painting and you're going so well, and
there's the boy right there. Somebody suggested I put my hand behind the.
I think it was Seth from that other podcast.
Anyway, doesn't seem to be working. Sorry, Seth, but there's the Echo.
Yeah, I mean, because you'll be painting like another color and you're going and you're like, oh yeah, this looks good, damn, I'm a good painter, and then you get to the white on the mod and you're like, no, I'm still suck.
I feel similarly about like yellows. Maybe I just like haven't found a good brand to use, but I just cannot get the consistency of the yellow paints right. Ever.
Yellow is worse than white. Yellow is significantly worse than white.
Recommend the Monument Hobbies Pro. Their yellow is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Okay. I'll check it out because man, I was painting something yellow recently, and it was just like I like to do like a lot of my hair is like blondish, you know, and like it never comes out the way I want it to.
Blonde hair stuff.
Yeah.
What's the trick with that? You paint pink underneath it, and then you paint yellow on top of it, and that generally helps the yellow.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to. That's what you're supposed to do. Maybe we can talk about painting light colors on one of our hobby episodes. But yeah, you're supposed to paint pink underneath and then put the yellow on top. It's still not like if you're using a paintbrush instead of an airbrush, you still need like 10 coats of yellow.
That's the issue I run into. I don't have that type of patience to I thin my paints, but I feel like you really got to thin them down like pretty far to like be putting 10 coats of paint on. you know, like I don't know.
Yeah. I tried to do Bosk's jumpsuit by hand, which is yellow, and I think after 5 coats I still was not happy with how consistent it was going on. I was like, screw it, I'm gonna just airbrush this.
Yeah.
And I still haven't done that because I haven't had a good reason to field Bosk after 88 came out. But yeah, so Bosk is like half painted. I've got all his skin done, and then he's got like his crappily painted yellow. Anyway, all right. Well, congrats on getting your invite.
Thank you.
And we saw you mentioned some stuff at that tournament that people are trying. That's interesting. One of those things is Mandos.
Mm-hmm.
So we mentioned last week briefly that Indy Open, which was a 40, I'm gonna forget the number, 40 something player tournament.
Sounds right.
In Indianapolis, was won by Brian Bear running Mandalorians, Rebel Mandos specifically, which for a long time had been, I think it's not a hot take to say bad, objectively bad. And they got some nice points reductions to the base unit, to the rockets. Overall, I think the whole package is like 12 points cheaper, which is
per squad, right?
Per unit, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, when you're taking 3, that's 36 points. That's enough for 2 medics, basically. So yeah, I think they're pretty interesting.
Medics are still in this game. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. In fact, I think Brian had 3 of them.
Yeah.
If you're bringing Rebel Mandos, you better be packing at least 2.
Yeah, he this is just off the top of my head. I'm not actually looking at his list, but I think it was called something like Zombie Mandos or something like that. And he had his 3 medics. So yeah,
nice.
I mean, that's the primary downside always and still of Mandos, is that those blanks really hurt because it's 1 wound per model and it's only 4 models in a unit. So you get a bad rollout. You roll 2 blanks or whatever, and suddenly like half your unit's dead, and that really diminishes their firepower significantly. So, yeah, medics. Bring your medics if you're running any Rebel Mandos. I guess Shadow Collective can't bring normal medics. They can bring a bus medic if they want. But, yeah, I think they're really interesting now. I would personally take them with Cassian because I still can't wrap my head around the fact that Cassian is now 90 points.
Dude.
Is his gun free too?
No, his gun is free. Yeah. That's why he's 90 points.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I still think Rebels are pretty bad.
I don't know if I would say that, simply because of how good Cassian is, and also Ahsoka. Like, they definitely still have a problem with their core, which is going to affect every list that they build.
Yeah.
But I think that Cassian and Ahsoka might be good enough that it kind of doesn't matter. Like, you can build some pretty decent Cassian Ahsoka lists with Rebel Vets and MK2s, and they're not, like, don't get me wrong, Rebel Vets and MK2s are not shore troopers, right? They're not shores and mortars, but they're fine, and they're cheaper. Vets are 10 points cheaper than shores when you account for the heavy cost, and then MK2s are 2 points cheaper than mortars. So the whole package is cheaper, and then you've got, so let's compare it just as a similar archetype to something like a Iden Boba list, for example, which is a thing that I think most people would agree is just a straight up good list, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Iden is 25 more points now than Cassian, and she's most commonly used in a sniper role. Granted, Cassian does not have tactical strike, which is not nothing, but Cassian has much better aim access. His sniper rifle has better dice on it. And he's 25 points cheaper more than Iden. So at least if you just compare the model, Iden to Cassian, Cassian is actually like better at his job than Iden is. He's 25 points cheaper.
So no? I brought this up here. Hold on. I brought this up. I got to share this because people share screen. So this is something I ran.
Oh, we're getting serious.
A long time ago. And I just put the points back together, and I can put together a 12 activation Cassian list with 2 Pike Syndicate foot soldiers and a capo, and still have 30-point bid, and still figure out what I want to put in there. Like I could add some more, I could add some more Pike troopers, like whatever. But I mean, this is the type of stuff you can do with Cassian now.
Yeah,
I definitely.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I definitely think that like any good Rebel list that I've made doesn't start with Cassian, but it does start with something else that's in your list, Jay. It's Capo and Pikes. Yeah, I've been playing Commander Luke, Ahsoka, triple Pike foot soldiers with capos in them. I actually played it in my Yavin base game. And it's Ahsoka's Swift Protector card with Pikes is like kind of really griffs.
Yeah, I mean that card is silly in general, and then you put it on a unit that actually is a good dodging unit, unlike Rebel Troopers. And,
yeah, that's what I mean. I definitely I actually think, Jay, that this list is probably pretty good. I think I'd put Kappas and foot soldiers for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think but again, I think that this list is winning on the merits of mercenaries, which is not a problem per se.
Well,
I guess
it's a problem in that I think you could say that the best Rebel core unit is not a Rebel unit.
Yeah,
I mean, I think you can say that about Republic too, for the most part. I think the best Republic unit is also not a Republic unit. I think the disparity is much smaller.
I think that's more debatable.
Do you guys? So let me ask you this: our audience is gonna lose it because they can't go an episode without me talking about Ewoks. Ewoks. I guess Ewoks still wouldn't fit, right? Because they're not rebel. They're bright tree, so they're mercenary as well. So
they're also mercenaries.
That wouldn't even change that dynamic. Never mind.
I mean, I think in fairness to the Ewoks, don't discriminate against them yet. I think they're rebel enough that you can count them as a rebel. Like as far as keeping the list rebel, I think we can call them a rebel unit.
Given that no one else can take them.
Yes, I feel like you were headed with that question, Jay, on if they were going to change the dichotomy of non-bright tree lists.
Yeah.
Kyle's going to poo-poo this because we've talked about it before, but I think the answer to that could very possibly be yes. I definitely think that double buses or single buses with the chargy Ewoks inside, and keeping the bus like pretty cheap. Like you can take like just the bus and maybe a gun on top of it, and just like have the Ewoks like go all chargy and really get at it. For much cheaper than Wookiees, and frankly, I don't know. They're almost as good as Wookiees. If you give them the Trapper, you can also like take tenacity and stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Tenacity on them is fun.
I think you want into the fray probably, but yeah.
It's possible. Like I'm not going to claim to have like theory crafted the best configuration for how to do this because this isn't really my style. But I definitely think that this is a thing that I think people are bare minimum going to try, and I actually think might be good. Frankly.
Yeah, I've never. Look, this could work. Don't get me wrong. And
I told you, everybody.
Yeah.
I think Ewoks are pretty interesting in a normal rebel list, especially like the Wicket double Ewok skirmisher combo for that scout move. I don't know if you need the bus.
I don't know if
I'm not going to say that it's like a bad choice because I think the underlying concept, which is Wicket and two Ewoks, I think is potentially great in Rebels. So I don't know that you're like ruining that concept by taking a bus. It's just a different way to do it. Personally, I don't think that you need the bus to make that setup good for what you're paying.
Yeah, I think the Ewoks definitely, there is the potential for them to just evaporate from the board if before they hit their target if they're not in the bus is really the only reason I'm considering the bus in that equation. Much more so than if you're like shooting at Wookiees, right? Ewoks have significantly less health from a like time to contact if you're just like running them as a missile, right? Like 8 health versus 12 is a pretty big deal, particularly if there's like a shield involved and stuff.
Yeah. And as much as cover has changed in the game, I still think when you're trying to do something like a charging unit, you're still going to find gaps in the terrain, right? That they're not going to be able to benefit with low profile, and like trying to get them into position is going to be difficult without somebody getting some shots off on them at some point in the move up, right? If you're going like a missile, I guess, in your example.
I think in this example, I think you're right. I do think because of the Bright Tree special rules that's not going to be the case in the Battle Force, because they're always going to have suppression tokens.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So low profile is just always on. But yeah.
Yep, suppression tokens with C3PO compelling them onward. And Logray giving them courage 3. So it's funny. I feel like Bright Tree is going to be almost kind of like running a droid list where anything between like 0 and 5 suppression tokens kind of just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I 100%.
It's essentially bookkeeping.
I'm not convinced that like 3PO is actually good, from the sense that he actually makes it easier to kill your Ewoks, because you can just shoot 3PO. He doesn't have low profile,
right?
And he doesn't have any like dodge shenanigans going on. So like, and I feel like it's going to be difficult to like normally a unit like this, you'd be like, all right, I'm going to hide him behind an LOS block and use him to like compel or whatever. But we're talking about units that like pretty much they've got to get to a bare minimum range 2 to do anything. And most of them have to get a lot closer than that. So like that means 3PO's gotta kind of also have to be up in your grill. So I feel like you're going to be able to shoot him, which means divine influence is going to be useful. But I also think it means that you're going to be pulling Ewoks. Like you can just shoot 3PO and kind of negate the low profile thing, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think that you need the compel, and he's only 40 points. I also think potentially, you could run him up behind your Chewie ATST, which is a mobile line of sight blocker.
That is a thing you could do for sure.
Yeah. There are ways. But yeah, I think that he's essentially, because of how their suppression rules work, I think he's basically required, because otherwise you've got a bunch of courage 1 melee units that don't strip suppression. So
I think him and Logray are just like in every Bright Tree list ever.
Yep, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and I think there's other, I've been playing around with different things, but like endurance, you could play around with that a little bit too, to try to to try to mitigate some of that if you don't want to play C3PO. I don't know. I haven't really thought a ton about it, but I've been just kind of theory crafting some stuff. But my problem is the 2 non Bright Tree units. Like I don't care about them. Like that's not why I'm here, boys. I'm here for the Ewoks and Chewie. But I get why they did it. It's just I just hate it.
I don't know. I mean, like a 13 activation list with Han Solo at the end of those 13 activations is actually probably like a pretty good Han list, to be quite honest. So I mean, yeah, I feel you there, but I do think it's definitely interesting on what you can put at the tail end of those activations in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, one of them's probably just going to be Leia, because she seems super good in Bright Tree Village. So
yeah, she handles the suppression. She augments your dodge, your defensive thing going on already.
She gets your charge units up closer. I mean, yeah, she does a lot for them.
Yeah, she does the teamwork thing with the Wicket.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, we definitely got on an Ewok tangent on an episode that was not supposed to feature Ewoks.
Well, I mean,
take that, you bastards.
No, I mean,
for all you people listening who are like, oh, we're talking about Ewoks again this episode, Jay. Yes.
I mean, they're the thing to be excited about right now in Legion, right? Like, I think, I mean, I don't know how your local community is, but like mine right now is like, oh man, like Shatterpoint stealing the spotlight. And as someone who's enjoying Shatterpoint, I'm like really digging that. But we still got stuff coming, and like Ewoks are not my cup of tea, but like they're definitely going to like change the rebel dichotomy, and they're going to shake up the meta. I do think they have the potential to be a little gatekeepy in the same way that Dark Troopers are, but you know, we can can or not discuss that. I don't care.
Let's see if it actually happens first, and then
Well, for me, for this is the first battle force that had units coming out that actually felt like it was all, yeah, it was a battle force. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
501st is close, but like, but everything else just kind of felt cobbled together. Remnants, even the Shadow Collective stuff, like they're all Shadow, I guess. But like, this is the first one where I'm like, oh, this is like a true, like a real battle force. And even the 2 Rebel thing, though I hate it, makes sense because they were there, and Han and Leia, like that all makes sense. It's all fine. So so even if you add them in, I'm okay with that. It's just super compelling from a hobby perspective, a game perspective, a play perspective. Like it just, for me, it hits all the notes that Legion should be hitting everybody, right? And I think some people feel that, but this is the first time in a while that I've been like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. I'm so excited about this.
I think whether or not Bright Tree is a success is sort of irrelevant. At least I think to the conversation we're having / about to have, is that I think fundamentally the work that they put into this, the assets they put into this, the amount of support this battle force has, is what every battle force should probably have.
Yeah.
At least from a like design support perspective. This is like when you say battle force and want to get the community excited about something you're doing, like this is it. Like, this is great. The product is great. Whether or not it's like broken or balanced or whatever, like we can deal with those issues like later down the road. When we're talking about like a themed release, this is amazing. And I think it's good. We should be excited about this, even if you're not a Rebel player. Like, what this means is that when Republic gets Gungans, it should sure as hell better look like this, right?
Yeah.
When CIS gets the Geonosians that we were previewed at Adepticon, like with how they were talking about it, it sure sounded like this, right?
Yeah.
They were talking about like what's his face, Hoggle the Lesser, and I think they even named a couple other like Geonosians in that panel, and like that's how deep. Yeah, I want them to get. That's what I want to see in the game. One of my favorite things about Lord of the Rings was like when they were like, oh, we're gonna do like Helm's Deep, like, and we're just gonna like hit it hard. There was like a Helm's Deep box set with like all like special sculpts for like all the characters and like the garb that they were had on in Helm's Deep, and you got like extra stat profiles, and they pitched you like 15 different scenarios that like you could like form into a campaign for like the Battle of Helm's Deep, and then they do the same thing for the Siege of Minas Tirith and all that stuff. And this is what that feels like to me, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, it all seems very, even just beyond the fact that it's a bunch of exciting new models, it all seems very cohesively designed in that like all the command cards kind of lean into each other and also push it thematically in a direction that you feel like is appropriate for the battle force.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of like what you saw with the original 4 battle force releases, where it's essentially just like effects from other command cards pulled out of context and slapped onto a different command card. Like this all appears to have been clearly designed from the ground up, specifically to do the Ewok thing. And I think that's great. And I hope, like you said, I hope that we see the Geonosians like that. I hope that we see future battle forces like that. Hopefully there's what is it, Tempest Force is coming out also, supposedly, that they've talked about in the past.
They have suggested it, though I sort of feel like we probably would have seen it at this point, but I don't know, maybe not. It seems like a good force to release at the same time as Bright Tree.
Well, and they still got a couple. They still got a couple weeks. So I think if I was them from a marketing perspective, let's say I already like put out all the Ewok stuff, right? Like, okay, that's it. Well, what am I going to do to get people excited on release day so that they actually go and buy it? For those of people who aren't excited yet, well, I released this other battle force, and then that Hopefully that's what they do. That's what I would do. You know.
Yeah. And I think I think we're getting nods that like this is the sort of thing they're gonna start doing, and I think this is a great first step.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. All right. Well, this Ewok excitement episode was no.
Take that, you listeners.
So I played over the weekend also. I played a Callus list because Facebook overwhelmingly told me that I should play Callus at LSO. So I figured I should at least put him on the table.
Yep. How'd that go?
It went pretty well. I played against our very own Evan Bulris. He was running a Cassian K2. It was basically like a Rogue One list. He had Cassian K2, Jin, and Pathfinders in it.
So not good.
Speaking of battle forces, I'd love to see support for.
Yeah.
Can we just get the Pathfinders like a normal generic heavy weapon? Like, just can't Biston just go like punch out one of the Rebel Troopers E6s and just pick it up? You know, or literally any other Pathfinder do that. I just want a generic heavy weapon.
I think you could
make more than one Pathfinder unit and feel good about it.
I think you could probably just say that Pathfinders can take Rebel Trooper heavies and it would be fine.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. The list, yeah, I mean, look, it had Cassian in it and K2, and those are very good units. I would say that the list could be made more efficient by not having Jin in it. And I think Evan would probably agree with me. It was still a pretty good list for a test. But anyway, I ran I ran Callus, Boba, and 3 speeder bikes, and then some shore troopers and stuff. It was interesting. I definitely missed the 4th speeder bike.
Turns out that matters, huh?
It does. Don't get me wrong. 3 speeder bikes are still good. Speeder bikes are still great. They were good in this game. Boba's obviously still amazing. I think most of the work was done by Boba. He killed like 4 units, if not 5. Boba's just so good. Empire Boba with Rebel Boba's cards. Simple Man is so good. But anyway, that's not a hot take. People know that Boba Fett is good.
Yep.
Callus, he's really interesting at his new cost. His damage is actually respectable. I used him in this game to chase down the hostage. I actually used Face Me for its like unique card effect to make the unit that he engages not withdrawal. On turn 2, I played it to get priority and then immediately engaged the hostage unit and then left the last guy alive after Callus whacked him with his bow rifle staff, and then they couldn't withdraw, so they were stuck in the middle of the table. Callus ended up dying because eventually he killed that unit and then immediately got shot by everything in Evan's list.
Sounds right.
But he did tie up the hostage long enough for me to like focus on killing other stuff. So yeah, he was interesting. His command card's definitely, the 3-pip actually is, I think, pretty good. It's kind of like a position neutral coordinated fire that you can with more order flexibility. It has that same kind of feeling where your offense kind of wraps up over the course of the turn. Except you don't have to worry about like where you're passing aims to or whatever. You just it's kind of the inverse, right? You have to worry about what you're shooting at instead of what you're shooting with. So yeah, I'd say it's a reasonably effective card. It also obviously has cunning attached to it. So if your opponent also plays a 3-pip, you get priority, which is pretty neat. ISB Investigation is amazing. Clearly his best card. And then I also used Face Me for its intended purpose, which I think is rare.
I assume you were playing Season Boba.
Yes, I was playing Season Boba.
Okay.
As an aside, I think even if Boba is your only character, you should still play Season Boba. Because it allows you to get the simple man effect where you don't give an order to Boba with the card, and then you get the marksman and the range extension and the free aim token. And you can still give Boba an order with C's because you're giving something else an order with the card because of the way the card reads. So yeah, I think Season Boba, like the first 5 points that I spend on Empire Boba Fett is always C's.
All right, here's a hot take.
Okay.
My number may fluctuate here because I'm trying to think of all the operatives, but I was going to say I think 80 to 90% of operatives, if you put them in your list, should have C's. See, that's a thinker, isn't it?
I think it.
I don't know if I'd go that high. It's
I'll
definitely a
give
good
you
upgrade on
60 to
operatives.
70.
Yeah.
I'll give you more than half.
All right.
Yeah. I think the bounty hunters I think you want it on 88 and Boba
Mhm.
Fett.
I think there's
I don't think
definitely
Bosk needs it.
situational ones, right? Like I think OP Luke, it depends on what else you're running. Like it's but like
You can't give C's to OP Luke. You
He's
need
got to
it
be
into the fray. It's got to be into the fray.
Yeah.
okay, Kyle.
Kyle's not wrong here.
I think it depends. I really do. I think I had success with OP Luke and Sabine, and I had C's on both of them, and
That was when deflect worked in melee, though.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's fair. Now that I forgot. Damn, I forgot about deflect. That's right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. I take back
Yep.
what I said with OP Luke. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, his one training slot, unfortunately, now is basically not an option anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a whole separate conversation. But
yeah, that's an entire podcast. Yeah,
I think that was one of the better changes.
Man,
I'm sort of trying to just rile you up, but I'm also being honest.
Just Mike Berry hates force users is what I'm hearing from this podcast.
No, I think
not Anakin.
I think all of the force users that deserve to get hit got hit.
What if they said Gem Soda didn't give you surge in melee anymore, and
but here's the
Anakin
thing:
couldn't spend his own dodge.
Here's the thing: the force users I play are actually trained in how to use the force. They are trained in our Jedi arts, and
what about
yours
Grievous?
Are not.
What about Grievous? Grievous gets surges in melee when he spends dodges.
I mean, he's trained in our Jedi arts.
Yeah, apparently.
Well, the crazy thing is that like dark force users just forgot how to use how to pick who they wanted to choke,
how to block things, or that too. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a random group. Just anyone in that group. I'll choke one of them.
I also think
just make sure it's not the most important.
Not dead.
I think it's still. I think it's still fine on Vader.
Choke is still good.
I think it's still fine on Vader for killing that last model. I would not take it on anyone else, I don't think. But anyway, I think that's all. I mean, we've beaten the choke horse, I think, already.
Yeah, we have. We're pretty aggressive about that one.
Were you? Okay. Mistakes were made, audience. They were wrong. We'll forgive them.
Yeah, I think Callus is interesting.
Man of the people, Mike Berry. That's what I've always said.
I'm trying to bring it. I'm trying to bring it back. No. I would not do it. I would not do him with the bikes again. I feel like he's a gunline commander.
Yeah.
If I was to run that same list, I would just replace the bikes with like more core beef, basically, or Iden. But I don't think he gels super well with bikes.
I think
so.
Yeah, I mean, I think your experience is kind of what I expected, and to some degree, it's like I feel like Callus has always been kind of like Leia to some degree, and that like command cards are super good. Chassis is like just got to be cheap enough to be playable, sort of situation, you know. Yeah. Callus obviously is a little bit more combat effective than Leia is for a slew of reasons, but that's also why he's 90 points, and I think probably takeable now. So.
Yeah, I think he's down to that cost now where you take him for his command cards and his cunning, and then, you know, periodically he shoots something with a decent attack at range 3, and you're like, hey, look, you killed a model. All right. You know, and he usually does kill like a model because he's got 4 dice with tactical and lethal and sharpshooter 1. So I'd say it's pretty like standard for him to just pick up a dude at range 3 whenever he attacks, which is decent, you know, like that's not specifically what you're bringing him for, but for a commander that has pretty good support abilities and command cards, you know.
He's I know, I mean, I've seen a lot of people like go back to Krennic, and I'm like looking at him like, you could take Krennic for cunning, or you could take like Callus and like have a unit that also does things other than like give you a cunning 1 pip, but their 2 pips in my mind are similarly powerful, and they do different things.
They do very different things.
But Callus's 3-pip is also much better than Annihilation Looms. So
Yeah, that I agree with. I will say that I think Krennic. I mean, Compel is not nothing if you've got a list with like a bunch of Courage
that's
1
fair.
core units in it. But also, like if I'm running a Dark Trooper list with one of those commanders, I'd much rather have Krennic because I think deploy the garrison leans much harder into what the Dark Troopers want to be doing. But
That's very fair, particularly because they can't be removed.
So I haven't. Do
Yeah.
you think is there a world where? Is there a world where you could go back to like an old like remember middle management? Like I wonder if there's like a Callus
Callus Krennic.
Krennic Dark Trooper list that might be interesting.
I think you'd struggle to fit all that unless you only took one Dark Trooper and then
Yeah,
what do
one
you,
Dark.
what do you I mean, are you even
What are you
trying?
doing? What's that
If
supposed
you
to mean?
didn't spend 400 points on Dark Troopers, like what are you doing? Go home.
Yeah, right. I do think you could potentially make like a reasonably interesting Empire gun line with those two. I mean, I'm not saying it's better than taking Callus with like a bounty hunter or Iden.
Yeah.
But I could see it. You know, if you're bringing like a bunch of shores and storms and stuff, that Compel's interesting. You've got 6 command cards with cunning. You probably have a Death Trooper unit in there if you've got Krennic. I
Hot
don't know.
take 13. I don't think Empire Core is that much better than Rebel Core.
I think it's better enough. Look, you're not. I don't think you're going to make a list centered around the Empire Core, but
No.
it's better enough that they can support the very good Empire characters reasonably well. And
I
feel bad
agree
about it.
That was sort of where I was headed with it. Was
Yeah.
that Jay, you asked about middle management, and like middle
Yeah.
management is like very much like that list archetype is kind of like built on the foundation that like Imperial Core has to be kind of carries that list, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think Imperial Core is good enough to do that anymore. I think those units are still like as powerful as they were. I just think like the game has kind of grown up around them a bit.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. Are any factions core good enough to do that?
Yes. I think Republic and Shadow Collective, I think both can do that. And I think the reason for that is they actually have synergy within their faction. I actually think potentially Bright Tree Villages are too. And I think we're entering a little bit new era of Legion where if the foundation of your army is not synergistic, like your core just are not going to really cut the mustard in a way that is effective. And we've sort of been like dabbling and like on our way there, but you know, I think we've seen that with like Separatists. Like Separatist core used to be like really good, like for what it was, and nowadays it's just like it's not good enough to really overcome the synergy of fully loaded pikes or fully loaded, you know, phase 2s just unloading on you. You're just picking up a full B1 unit every time, you know, and that's just not a way to win the game. So
yeah, you're right. I think in my head, Rebels and CIS are kind of at the same level where I feel like the core units are just in my way to making a good list. Like it's just
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And in Separatists, like you really actually have to like still invest in them. In Rebels, you can at least be like, okay, here's 120 points. I understand that this 120 points is like my like down payment on all the other units I'm taking. But in Separatists, like you can't take 3B1s and like expect your list to work. Which I think is foundationally the issue that Separatist players are facing right now, and that like that the faction identity of Separatists is its core and always has been to some degree. It's always got like a big showy piece next to it, but you can't not have a foundational core. You can't not invest points in a Separatist list. You have to.
Yep. Yeah, you need that mass coordinate for the order control.
Yeah, otherwise nothing else works.
Right.
At least as it stands.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe this is a good time to talk about ACO.
Yeah, there we go.
Because our very own Austin Miller won that with a Separatist list. And I think that Separatists can still make good lists. I think they look like Austin's, which is he ran Ventress Bane with
Yep.
Magnus and a bunch of B1s, which I think that was actually a list that I kind of had my eye on before the points changes. Ventress is definitely the choke thing definitely hurts her, but she relies on it a lot less, I think, than Dooku does. I think there's some other options for that second force slot for her, particularly force speed. I don't actually know if that's what Austin took, but let me check. Yes, he took burst of speed.
Burst push.
Yeah, burst push into the fray. Which I think is like going to be the new, if you run Ventress, that's kind of just what you run on her.
She definitely, that's not a platform where the current iteration of choke is very good.
No. So yeah, and I think this is interesting. The B1s in here are definitely like, only 4 of them have heavy weapons. They're the E5S, which if you're going to give them a heavy, that's what you give them now. And the other ones have medical droids. So because Ventress is squishy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's clearly this is a list that's not about the B1s. He took 6 because you need to, but yeah, I think you can still make a good droid list. I do not think the points changes increase or changed at the units that you're taking as part of that calculus. But I think you can still make a good separatist list.
I guess I definitely wasn't trying to say that you couldn't. I just definitely think that like a good separatist list looks maybe unsurprisingly like a good empire list these days, and that like it's basically we're gonna kind of take a minimal amount of core that like can sort of poke at range 4, whether that's Shores or E5S's, whatever. And then you take double bounty hunters, which is basically what Asajj Cad is. I mean, like Asajj is a little bit more versatile than that. But obviously you put double bounty on the table and you have 2 super flexible characters that can flank and poke and do all sorts of fun stuff,
Yeah, it's very structurally similar to like an Empire double bounty list.
Yeah.
I do think, at least with Shores, Shores can poke at 4, but they can also absolutely still slap you at 3.
100%.
Now, granted, they're a Shore unit is 30 more points than a B1 unit, so
they're very expensive. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think this is interesting. This is something that I was wanting to try before, and I'm still interested in trying. I unfortunately do not have the heart to go back and fix my Asajj paint job yet. I totally ruined it with OSL.
Dude, are you serious? I just did the same thing with my Shatterpoint.
Really?
One.
This is why I don't do OSL.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's
I should have just left it alone. I have done perfectly good to great OSL with an airbrush. For whatever reason, but you got to be. We can talk. We might have already talked about this
we did. Yep.
Yeah.
Last week.
I just put my finger a little too much spray. It was great, and then I did the thing, and it was like right on 30% of the side of the model.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So anyway, I got to go back and fix her at some point, but I don't have the heart to do it right now. So, all right. Well, do you guys have any more thoughts? General thoughts? Anything thoughts?
Yeah. Listen, I think it's good to have Mike back.
Hey,
definitely.
Number one. Yeah.
It's been great to have Mike back in general, just like in the chat, everything. Obviously,
That's what I just said. Don't copy me. Come up with your own thoughts on this.
I missed this a lot.
Yes. I did too. It's great to have you back, Mike.
Thank you.
I'm excited about your Shatterpoint podcast.
I am too. I definitely, it's a really great game, and I really want to get you guys into it so that you can be as excited as I am. I don't think it's probably like a super competitive game, but it is very fun.
Competitiveness aside, I do want to try it, and I will fully disclose that I have not yet played it, and I'm making this statement based purely on all of my friends that have played it and I've spoken to about it. The scale to me, it's just not quite my style.
So, if I may,
Yeah, please.
Because I think the way that I describe it might sell you on it.
Okay.
And it may unsell Jay on it, frankly. We'll see.
Jay loves
But
MCP. If it's anything like MCP.
I do love MCP.
the way I would describe Shatterpoint is that every activation you make is like activating your force user on key positions on turn 6 in the most complicated key positions game you've ever played. Everything you do in the game feels like that.
Interesting.
And if you like that sort of thing,
I do.
I think you will enjoy it very much. If you don't like that sort of thing, I think you will enjoy it a lot less than other people. And I think I know both of you well enough to know what the answers to that question is.
I'm not playing this game. Just gonna throw this all in the garbage.
Yeah, I do enjoy it. I do enjoy that. I think I would miss. I like also all the Joe Schmo units supporting that guy. I like doing random little things with the Joe Schmo units, and I like
Good.
angles. I like the positioning on a 6x3 board. Not that there is
angles matter a lot in this game, more so than they ever did or currently do in Legion. They matter far more in Shatterpoint because basically the way that force push works in Shatterpoint is that it's drawn in a straight line between you and your target.
And they go directly backwards.
They go directly backwards, and more importantly, when you force push something, or it's not just force push, there are a bunch of effects that do this. It's called a shove. When you shove, you also move directly forwards in a line towards your target, or you have the option to. And if there's something that impedes their movement in that direct line, they immediately stop. And that could be another character or a wall or whatever.
But
you
can not also, cliffs. You could push them off cliffs.
You can shove them off cliffs. Yeah, it's really great. So and the entire thing, it's interesting because it's like, not to like go back and beat a horse that I assume you guys have beat to death, but a lot of things that they have kind of taken out of Legion, I feel like are actually a large part of this game, and that like positioning really matters in this game to a degree that I was not expecting after the changes they made to Legion, frankly.
Yeah, because they definitely made positioning matter a lot less in Legion.
100%. Not close. Yeah. And they matter much more in this game in a way that is good, but it is very complicated.
Okay, well maybe I like it. I'll have to try it next time we're in the same.
This whole podcast is going under. It's all gonna. You're gonna move right over to the Shatterpoint podcast.
I love the minis in Shatterpoint. The minis are incredible.
They are beautiful.
They are very good
for sure.
I do think just from a complexity aspect, like it is far less approachable than Legion is for that very reason. I think I'm like 10 to 12 games in, and it is still overwhelming, and I feel like I'm generally pretty good at complex games. And there are just so many options all the time, and there are so many like ongoing effects that like there's a lot of like, if you guys are familiar with Magic, there's like, it's kind of like you just have like 6 to 7 creatures with like onboard effects that like trigger when certain things happen, and like if you don't know your card super well, you like miss the effects, and like in a way where like in Legion, like I activate my unit, I move up and and I shoot, and like sometimes there's stuff that interacts, but like overall, like when you activate a unit in Legion, it's like very independent of everything else that's going on, unless you're like playing clones or something. So I like clones, but
I think in that way MCP gets like that, because you have a turn and you can attack twice, you can move twice, you move attack, but then you have all these superpowers So like literally, if you have enough power built up on a character like Hulk, for example, like I could literally be going, I could have like 5-7 different things that I'm doing all in a turn, damaging this guy, throwing this guy, pushing that one, hitting this one, moving up, jumping, like there's so I could definitely see that with Shatterpoint. And that was the thing, like when we came back from Adepticon, we did a live stream of the Fifth Tile podcast, and I had one of the guys from Professional Casuals on, and we were talking about Shatterpoint and our demo, and I was like, even with their scripted demo, I was still like, oh, I'm missing a lot. Like I'm still not fully comprehending what the hell just happened in that scripted demo, like, and so and that's, I think, besides wanting to paint up the minis, that's the thing that's been kind of keeping me from it for really getting it on the table. It's just like I don't think I'm mentally ready to like put this on the
It's a lot. Your first game, if you play it through and try to play it correctly, will be at least 3 hours. I would say that like one of the things that I had expected was that it was going to be maybe not much shorter game, but it was going to be like shorter game to put on the table. It was going to be more like, oh, we've got an hour and a half. We could play a game of Shatterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's what this is after playing it.
Interesting.
A dozen times. Yeah.
What makes you say that you don't think it could be necessarily competitive? Because it sounds like it has a lot of interesting nuance to it.
So a lot of the positional stuff is really cool, and there's a lot of angles and stuff. But whenever you try to do a lot of that sort of thing, so there are a lot of like MCP-esque effects that Jay kind of alluded to, where you can like spend power in Shatterpoint. You've got force. They're very similar concepts. You get them in different ways in each game, but overall you spend them to do like abilities on your character. However, most of the actual movement and stuff comes from being as a result of your attacks. I'm sure that you guys have seen the like kind of like elaborate talent tree looking like damage things, and basically like how far you can move an opponent, or like how you can manipulate your opponent, is often a result of the damage and roll and the saves, and you can't really plan for that super well.
So there's just a lot of randomness and variance.
It doesn't feel like randomness and variance when you're playing, in that like you can kind of expect certain results, but there are just so many options and so many like, I guess, branching decision paths that if the game is competitive, I don't feel like the number of people that will be able to play it at a high level will be large in scale.
Interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah, the thing with MCP is it's played competitively, right? But like there's so much variance and things that are going on the board that like you can even bring the best team, you can prepare for everything, but your dice variance can go skyrocket in either way, and none of it, you're like, oh, so basically everything I just did, the list that I built, like all the thought I put into this, it didn't matter because Hulk came in and just like smashed my face, and I rolled nothing, and that's
and I think Shatterpoint looks like that on the surface, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that there is a lot of very, very things that look like variance, but from what I've kind of gathered at this point, is that there are actually like results you can get to. You just like, in order to do it, you have to do a lot of math. You have to know a lot. Like it's like a lot of things you have to understand properly in order to like know what the expected outcome of any given action you take is going to be.
This sounds like a great competitive game. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I think
everything you're saying is only like getting me more interested in this as a competitive game.
The worst part is I didn't even prep this sale. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to Matt Bronson a lot about it. He's very into it. I think people are gonna, yeah, I definitely think people that are like kind of like-minded in the way that, you know, like super high tier competitive Legion players tend to be. I think are gonna like the game for sure. I just, I'm not sold that it's. I hope that it is cool enough that the people that don't feel that way about Legion are able to like get past what I perceive to be a barrier to entry.
You think it's too complex to make it accessible enough to actually have a large enough competitive scene?
I think like yes, I think that if you were to bring this game to most gaming groups, including some that we're a part of, they would be immediately put off by how complicated this game is.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, one of the things I always liked about Legion was that the actual like base actions you take and the base way that the rules interact with those actions was actually incredibly simple.
Yeah.
And that it was just the you know, the things like positioning and like other small decisions that you make along the way that kind of added up to make it like an actual very high skill cap game. But not in a way that like, you know, the initial barrier as far as like the knowledge dump that you would need to get it on the table and start rolling dice and stuff was pretty low. It had that nice like scaling effect where you could get into it with a pretty low mental load, but then like the more time you spent on it, the more you realize that it was actually like a lot of interesting and complex nuance with the positioning and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think this is very much the reverse.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it gets easier to play as you like figure out that there's like all these complicated decisions that you have to make that aren't really that complicated, but they look insanely complicated. And that's just because there is so many of them.
Okay, interesting. Well, this Shatterpoint podcast brought to you by now. No, I'm glad we had that conversation because I have been sort of interested from the outside, but I have not had enough like time, frankly, to properly like invest the effort to like dive in a way that would allow me to properly assess whether I want to play it or not. So,
well, you let me know, and I will kick your butt anytime.
I'm sure that's. I have no doubt that's exactly what
you're probably gonna get like 2, and then Kyle go into calculator mode.
I don't know.
Super calculator mode.
As much as our competitive like on-stream games might beg to differ, I think Kyle and I are much closer to a 0.5 win-loss ratio than.
I've definitely lost more games to you than I have to anyone else.
Yeah.
In Legion.
Yeah.
So. All right.
I can give him a run for his money. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that take.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have any final thoughts? Shatterpoint, Ewoks, Dark Troopers.
Good to be back. This has been fun. This has been fun.
Yep, definitely.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
And I am Mike.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Stay cool, Fruit Matt.
I don't got anything.
Stay cool, Fruit Matt. What are you doing?
Since you've been back.
Yeah. Since you've been gone. Fair enough.
You guys hear that?
What?
No.
That was
thunder.
Crazy thunder. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, if I go away.